Have you ever looked at a map and wondered about that massive body of water between Europe and Asia? That's the Caspian Sea. But here is a fun fact that might just blow your mind. The Caspian Sea is Eonate, actually a sea. So, what is it then, and why? The confusing name. Let's dive in and unravel this geographical mystery. First off, let's get the technical stuff out of the way. Geographically speaking, the Caspian Sea is a lake. In fact, it's the largest lake in the world, hands down. A key characteristic of a sea is that it's connected to the world's oceans. The Caspian Sea, however, is completely landlocked. It's what scientists call an endorheic basin, which is a fancy way of saying that water flows into it, but it doesn't flow out to any ocean. It's a closed system, a giant puddle on a continental scale. So, based on the pure definition, it's a lake. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. If it's a lake, why do we call it a sea? The reasons are as vast as the Caspian itself. For starters, look at its size. It's enormous, covering an area of about 371,000 square kilometers. It's so big that it has waves, storms, and a horizon that disappears just like a real ocean. If you were standing on its shore, you'd be forgiven for thinking you were looking at a sea. Then there's the water. Most lakes we think of are freshwater, but the Caspian Sea is salty. It's not as salty as the ocean, but it's definitely brackish. This saltiness comes from the rivers that flow into it, carrying dissolved minerals, which then get concentrated over millions of years because the water has nowhere else to go but to evaporate. Its size, depth, and salt content all make it feel and act much more like a sea than your typical neighborhood lake. But the most fascinating reason for the sea label isn't geographical, it's political. For decades, the 5 countries bordering the Caspian, that's Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Iran, and Azerbaijan couldn't agree on what to call it. And this wasn't just a petty squabble over a name. There was a lot at stake. Namely, a massive amount of oil and natural gas reserves lying beneath its bed. Here is the deal. If the Caspian is classified as a sea under international law, then the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea would apply. This would mean the countries would have to establish territorial waters and exclusive economic zones, similar to how ocean borders are drawn. But if it's a lake, international law is much vaguer. The standard practice would be for the bordering nations to divide the entire lake bed and its resources equally or based on their coastline length. You can imagine the debates. Some countries, depending on their geography and what they stood to gain, argued fiercely for it to be a lake, while others insisted it was a sea. This legal limbo went on for years, creating a lot of tension over resource management, fishing rights, and military access. The stakes were incredibly high, with trillions of dollars in resources hanging in the balance. So, how did they solve it? After more than 2 decades of negotiation, in 2018, the 5 nations finally signed a landmark convention, and their solution was brilliant in its simplicity. They decided the Caspian Sea is neither a sea nor a lake. Instead, they gave it a special legal status. Under this unique agreement, the surface water is mostly treated as a sea, allowing for freedom of navigation and fishing under shared regulations. But the seabed, where all the valuable oil and gas is divided into sectors controlled by each country. It's a clever compromise that essentially says, we'll share the water, but we'll each own a piece of the ground beneath it. So, the next time someone asks you about the Caspian Sea, you can tell them it's not just a body of water, it's a geographical anomaly, a political chessboard, and a perfect example of how complex our world can be. It's a lake that looks like a sea, with a legal status that's entirely its own. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the fascinating quirks of our planet. See you next time.